Hi, everybody. I'm Zen Honeycutt of Moms Across America. And today we have a very important interview called What's Making America Sick? It's not just COVID, folks. We have a very important issue that we're going to be discussing. We were supposed to have Dr. Don Huber on with us today, but he had some technical difficulties. That's why we're late. I'm so sorry for that. But we do have the very esteemed Dr. Michelle Perro, author of What's Making Our Children Sick. And we're going to be expanding that and talking about what's making America sick. Good morning, Dr. Perro. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Zen. Thank you for inviting me.
I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to give a little background on Dr. Michelle Perro so that you know who we're talking to today. Dr. Michelle Perro is a veteran pediatrician with nearly 4 decades of experience in acute and integrative medicine. More than 15 years ago, Dr. Perro transformed her clinical practice to include pesticide and health advocacy. Yay! You may remember her back from the movie Genetic Roulette. She was one of the only doctors at that time to be able to spoke out about GMOs. She's also both directed and worked as an attending physician from New York's Metropolitan Hospital to UCSF's Benoist Children's Hospital in Oakland. Dr. Perro has managed her own business, Down to Earth Pediatrics, creating a new field of integrative urgent care medicine. She's currently lecturing and consulting, as well as working with Gordon Medical Associates, an integrative health center in Northern California. Dr. Perro has co-authored the highly acclaimed book, What's Making Our Children Sick, and is the executive director of a nonprofit scientific-based website called gmoscience.org. And she's going to be talking more about that today as well. She has authored many publications and has a new column with the journal, The Townsend Letter. So thank you once again, Dr. Perro, for being on with us today.
Zen, it's my pleasure. Please call me Michelle, and
okay.
happy to chat with you as well as the listeners.
Great. Yes. Yeah, so as we go along here today, folks, if you have questions, please do let us know. We will be answering the questions, probably some of them more towards the end, but we have some really good questions for you right now as well. So Americans are experiencing COVID right now, and the numbers show that we are sicker at higher levels of severity than other countries. And some say that these numbers are inflated because, you know, the hospitals get paid more if they diagnose a patient with COVID. But even if those numbers were, say, 50%, you know, not accurate, we would still be showing higher numbers than other countries, wouldn't we? I mean, America is still sicker than other countries. Is that not what's happening?
Absolutely, Zen. You know, that's panned out historically pre-COVID and now during COVID and hopefully post-COVID, not so much. But we are taking the charge in numbers of illness. Now, there are those who say we're testing more, not necessarily true. It's really clear that we're leading the pack. There are a few countries close to us, but still we are leading the charge in illness. And for those of us who've been in the food issue movement for a while, I don't think we're that surprised.
Yeah, because you wrote this book years ago, What's Making Our Children Sick, and you were seeing higher numbers of American children sick than in other countries. And we saw this firsthand. We toured Australia, New Zealand. Now there were some sick kids there, but you've been to China, you've been to many other countries. And the science and the data shows that Americans are more sick than other countries. That's what you're saying, right?
Statistically, that is true. And since, you know, my co-author, Dr. Adams, and I wrote that, will be 3 years in November, the statistics are actually worse since we published that book in terms of children's health. But if you look at statistics globally in terms of how we compare to similar countries with our economic status, we are way ahead in terms of chronic disease compared to other countries in a similar place that we are. And even in, you know, in terms of newborn infant mortality, we're doing terribly. So there's something not going right here in America. And I think it behooves us to take a deep dive into why we are one of the sickest countries dealing with COVID, as well as other things as well.
Absolutely. And I'm screen sharing your book today, What's Making Our Children Sick. It's available on Amazon. It's an excellent read and it's easy to read. You know, some doctors and scientists can get a little too heavy and have it not be understandable to the layman people, but you make it very easy to read. So this is an extremely important book for people to read. I would say every single family, because when you look at the numbers with 1 out of 2 children being sick, that's just the numbers that are reported. My experience is that every family I meet has a child with either an allergy or autism symptoms or some type of chronic illness, or at least eczema, which is an autoimmune issue, right? I mean, isn't that pretty much more what you're seeing now? Almost every family has a child that's sick.
Of course, this is anecdotal, but I believe you're accurate and it's true. And because so many common disorders are so common, where sick is the new normal, that people don't even attribute those things as being sick. So, for example, so many kids have chronic constipation. Constipation is not normal, but it's so common, it's just become part of the landscape. Or environmental allergies, or ADHD, or some of these things that you're mentioning, because you are absolutely spot on, Zen. They have affected so many families that it's now accepted as being normal, and that's abnormal.
Yes, that's abnormal. And having so many people get so sick from COVID is also, it's not a norm that we should accept. There must be something we can do about it. So what do you see is the reason why Americans are more sick than other countries?
So, I mean, I use the lens of food, and there are many reasons why we're sicker, Zen, but I want to hone in on our food supply and what we've done. And I'll make it brief because many folks, people who've been following your group for years now, and GMO science, et cetera, are aware of a lot of these issues. But we've been eating GMOs and their associated pesticides now for over 20 years. And in the majority of Americans' diets, that's all they're eating. Not only are these foods harmful, and we're spraying more and creating more toxic formulations of herbicide tolerant plants, but nutrient quality is so low that folks who are challenged with any immune challenges, viruses, bacteria, various stressors, don't have the gas in the tank, the nutrients needed to run their biologic systems so that they can fight off these illnesses. And this has been shown to be true. If you just look at zinc levels, you take something like zinc levels, not only are children low, and most pediatricians are not checking, and when they do check, they check the wrong thing, but the elderly have very low nutrient levels. And there's a study coming out to be published in January, which is showing that we can not only we can prevent COVID with nutrients. It will be published in January, and there's now a subtle break in this anti-nutrient sentiment that's been pushed during this COVID era, where there's starting to be some breaks, and we can talk about that further if you like. But we have documented nutrient deficiencies in our population.
Absolutely. And I want to show you, this is a chart that I sent to Dr. Don Huber, who was supposed to be on the interview with us today. Unfortunately, had technical difficulties. But when I showed him these numbers of the nutrients testing done on conventional food, and this was an organic farm, Ladybug Farm, and showed the difference, how there were higher levels of nutrients in the organic food, he was still quite dismayed. He said, I would be embarrassed to call that produce, if it came out of my garden, food, because these levels of nutrients, the zinc, the copper, magnesium, the potassium, are so low compared to what they should be. And that was very distressing for me, because we're looking at, we were thinking, oh, organics can be so much more nutrient dense, and it is more nutrient dense, but it's not at the level that it needs to be in order for humans to be getting the amount of nutrients that we're supposed to be getting. There's been a huge deficiency in our food over the past 50 years, which, surprise, surprise, involved chemical farming. And so when Dr. Don Huber saw this, he said, I would be embarrassed to call that food. And it's very unfortunate. So we do need to look at the nutrient density. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, it's interesting about that, and I didn't see that graph, but I'm familiar with what you were showing him. Thank you. And Don, we can bring Don back then, because he's so brilliant and so well versed in this. And what I don't want to talk about that, but what I can tell you is that parallel to this argument is we have an epidemic of obesity in children and adults. And 1 out of 5 kids is obese. And we all know obesity is not a benign disorder associated with all sorts of issues, from metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease and liver disease, et cetera. Now, when you're nutrient deficient, what happens is you're hungry. because you're not getting the nutrients you need. So you eat more. So people who are nutrient deficient are like, who eat a lot of carbs, for example, are trying to accommodate and eat more, which also might be contributing to the obesity factor and with this nutrient poor quality. Now, I do have a pet bugaboo that's really, it's like kind of poking at me all the time. So as an integrative practitioner, I recommend supplements. 20 years ago, I hardly had any kids on supplements. Now, I feel like everyone needs to be on a supplement. And I have a problem with that because those folks who can get supplements tend to be higher educated, more disposable income, putting your money toward your supplements and not your food. Why aren't we correcting our food? The idea that irks me every time I have to prescribe a multivitamin, because I'm like, no, we should be improving the quality of the food. And I shouldn't have to be giving these multivitamins. So I'm kind of in this Scylla and Charybdis all the time, prescribing all these supplements for kids when I'm thinking this is kind of crazy making, because what we should be doing is fixing and recreating regenerative agriculture and improving our nutrient density, the quality of our food.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And that comes from the soil. And again, Dr. Don Huber would address that, how important the quality of the soil is and the nutrients in the soil. And I'm so happy to see more and more posts happening about regenerative agriculture, because that is really the solution for getting the nutrients back in the soil, that and biodynamic farming. So I'm glad to have you mention that, because it is so important to know who your farmer is, where your food is coming from, to eat food fresh. When you eat food fresh, you are getting much higher nutrients than you were if you're going to eat a tomato or spinach that's come, 5 days off the farm. I think the depletion is something like 60 or 70% less vitamin C, if you're eating it many days later. So as much as you can, grow your own food, get your food from the farmer's market, eat it fresh, eat nutrient dense food, and continue. Yeah. And when you have to take supplements, but I agree with you, it can be quite expensive, 60, $100 a month. And for some people, that's just not doable to add in all these extra supplements.
And there are some interesting statistics that have come up during COVID, and I want to share some new things because many of your listeners have heard many of our issues regarding glyphosate, glyphosate-based herbicides, and Roundup and GMOs. So, it's regarding, I read an interesting statistic. During COVID, the rate of prematurity has plummeted, premature births, preemies. And I'm like, why is that? Now, because we're not eating in restaurants, many people are cooking and they're not eating out and they're preparing foods. I would love to see that study of the relationship for all of us who have not been eating out. Americans eat out more than just about any other country. 47% of American income goes to eating out. And where many folks are eating out, restaurants don't want to do restaurant bashing, but they're not often supplying quality ingredients like organic stuff, the stuff I want to eat when I eat out, and my family. And so I'm thinking, that is something we need to look at. Because we're home, we're cooking more, kids are home, kids are in the kitchen, right? All those kids in the kitchen helping dad cook. I'm not saying mom, I'm saying dad. So getting everyone cooking. And I want to know if that is linked to, for example, SIDS has gone down, sudden infant death syndrome, and prematurity, two major issues affecting children. So these are the kind of questions, great data that we're going to have shared with us post-COVID, and there will be a post-COVID. But I think there are things that we need to do during this time, and I just don't want to focus on COVID. But yes, I think there are things listeners, eaters, consumers, parents, et cetera, can do.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because this is COVID. There's going to be other viruses. There are trillions of viruses in the world. And if we don't get our immune system sorted out now, we're just going to continue to be at the effect of, we can't keep shutting down our entire economy every time a virus shows up. We need to strengthen our immune systems now. We know that obesity and I believe diabetes, right, increases the chance of mortality and severity of COVID. So that's not just going to be COVID, that's going to be other viruses as well, other reactions to medications or to other, type of chronic health issues. If your immune system is not strong, if you're obese, if you have other chronic health issues, you're going to not be able to recover or to resist. Your body's not going to be able to resist the viruses as much. So we have a question from one of our viewers. They're asking, do you believe it's important to promote a more plant-based approach, Dr. Pero? in your diet?
So I think what type of diet you eat is very specific and individualized. Whether you go keto, paleo, Mediterranean, plant-based, etc. And but however, I do promote a plant enriched diet. Whatever your diet is, it should be plant enriched. And I don't mean fake food plants like Impossible Burgers and the 100 patents pending right now from Impossible Foods with all these plant-like substances coming out. They're genetically modified, like the Impossible Burger, which I can rant on for a few years. But so yes, indeed, I support a plant-enriched diet, whether it's vegetarianism or not, veganism or not. Those are family decisions, health decisions based on the individual. However, you must eat the rainbow because plants produce the antioxidants we need. But the kind of thinking that I've evolved into over the years, Zen, is now because of all the information out now about the microbiome, right? The microbiota, those organisms in our tummies that literally help create and run our immune function, we need to eat for our microbiome. And we're now understanding that what matters is not so much probiotics, but prebiotics. Those foods, many of them are plant starches that our microbiota need to run their systems. Because the microbiome, if it's not healthy, you don't have health. So love your microbiota, support their health, eat prebiotic rich foods. I don't want to take it in a supplement, although some people have to, by eating plant fibers. And that's a rainbow.
Like sauerkraut and kombucha. Can you mention a few of what type of prebiotic foods you're talking about?
Yes. So for example, onion. Onion has inulin in it. Inulin is one of the best prebiotic foods there is. Of course, all the greens, all the cruciferous veggies like broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, all those veggies. And then we have all the fermented foods. Ferment, sauerkraut, kombucha, kimchi, and then the vinegars. I drink a little apple cider vinegar every morning because, and I got to tell your listeners this, Zen, that what's been shown to offset glyphosate are apple cider vinegar and sauerkraut juice. Now, kids, you have to get them used to it, but you can start incorporating in their diet because they contain a certain microbe called acetobacter, and acetobacter can break down glyphosate. So diet, what you eat, what you ate matters. And what you want to do is people who are sick have an altered microbiome. We want to create a more robust community of microbes. We're mostly microbial, 10 to 1 in many of us, microbes to human cells. We create this microbiome that's robust, healthy, and we're working in symbiotic relationship. So this is really important. And what I talk about now, from pre-pregnancy, conception, breastfeeding onward, is how do we support the microbiome? How do we detoxify prior? So it's all about prevention and what we're eating to create this enriched community that supports our immune function.
Yes, and I love that you brought up acetobacter. I try to say that every time I can to every audience. And it's been shown to break down glyphosate actually into non-toxic components, which is really important because it's not just drawing it out of the body and putting it to the sewage in our water where glyphosate can continue to, harm the environment. It actually breaks it down into non-toxic components. But this study was shown to do this in soil. So it wasn't shown to do it in the human gut, but we're just going with it. You know what? If it does it in the soil, it's probably going to do it in the gut. And it's also kombucha, sauerkraut, and apple cider vinegar. Yes.
And of course, I had the luxury of being shared with Howard Vlieger, our crop advisor friend, about what he does with his livestock. And I read studies using apple cider vinegar with livestock to improve their health because our livestock in America is not doing well. And I myself have chickens now, COVID chickens, I call them. And I give them a little apple cider vinegar in their water every day, promoting their health. And I'll give an interesting anecdote. My husband, don't mean to bash on husbands today, but his eating is not quite as good as it could be, needs a little improvement, saw us transform our chicken eggs into healthier eggs, healthier shells, more enriched yolk. He's like, wow, this thing is amazing. I'm like, yeah, I changed their diet. Like, oh, diet.
What did you do?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what I did. Apple cider vinegar in their water, just a little bit.
Okay.
And then I noticed their shells were weak. Let it go. They need more calcium. I took their shells, rinsed them with vinegar, mashed them up real fine, combined them with flaxseed and hemp seed to give them more omega-3s to increase the richness of the yolk, and then some oyster shell for some calcium. Put that in, crunch that all up, clean it up, give that into their feed as well. Of course, all organic feed. One egg in my house probably costs about $25. Just saying. But but this was a great example that kids and husbands, sorry, Rich, he's not watching. Thank God he worked last night. That what you eat matters. You could see it in the egg. So it's such a perfect example, and the eggs taste better. And when you see that orangey yolk, there's so much folate in there. There's so many B vitamins. It's really healthy. Egg is probably one of like the most perfect foods. For vegans out there, you guys, I'm not trying to push one diet or another. I'm just using this as an example, how kids and people, eaters, can see what happens when you change diet.
Absolutely. That's a great example. We have a viewer asking, what my kids are taking multi-supplements. Is it possible to over supplement? Should you be taking breaks from it? I know with things like CBD oil, you take it for a little while, then you take a break, and then you can take it again. Is it the same way with multi-supplements or?
Yes, indeed. You can over supplementize, and I just made that up. Please don't look that up. And there are fat soluble vitamins and water soluble vitamins. And sometimes those multivitamins have a lot of fat soluble vitamins in there, A, D, E, and K. So if you're taking high dose of these vitamins all the time, they accumulate in fat. And you don't want an overaccumulation. So you've got to keep an eye on how much vitamin A and E you're taking, D as well. There are some levels we can check. You can check all nutrients, but D is easily accessible. And if your level of D is too high, which I've seen in one kid over like years of practice, most kids are really low, then we know we need to cut back. I personally think you should take a break, and you can rotate them. And when your kids are having more stressors, COVID, California air from fires, etc., you can up their vitamins. And when they're doing well, you can cut back. Or when they're eating better, cut back. So I personally take a little holiday. I'm on a ton of supplements. I take a little holiday here and there, and I kind of alter my vitamins and sometimes take some vitamin breaks. So I think that's important. And I think it's good to rotate them. And yes, you must be very mindful of the brand. You don't want a lot of excipients in your vitamins. Excipients are the fillers that companies need to add to stabilize them. I don't want to, we can do a whole hour on this end, but these can be pretty harmful, particularly in babies. They don't tolerate a lot of those excipients. So you have to kind of know what you're doing a little bit, and don't want to over vitaminize yourself.
Okay, great. And we have a question we prepared earlier. I want to make sure that we get to this for people who do have COVID or think they have COVID. I know you're not a doctor, you can't give medical advice, but you've treated patients with COVID in your practice. So what have you seen with them, with those patients? I know this is, anecdotal, but what have you seen, or no, not anecdotal, but about your patients? What have you seen that works with them in treating COVID?
Yeah. So some simple steps then. What seems to work, and for full disclosure, I have not treated dozens of patients. I've treated just a few handfuls of patients. Okay. Because I don't have that kind of sick population, like let's say, people who are really on the front line. But what we're doing is, if they've been exposed or have it, either one, we up their immune function. How do we do that? Simply, and it's affordable, up their vitamin C. Vitamin C is cheap. And I used to give super high doses. Now I don't do that anymore. From the literature, it seems you can give lower doses more frequently. So it's a lower dose, more frequent that you want to do. Up their vitamin D. And so if you are exposed, I recommend, and it's individualized, of course, a lot of C and a lot of D if you're exposed and you have it. So I really up that. And then I use other herbs depending on the individual, such as whether they need selenium or berberine, different herbal products. I'll use those. I'll use the probiotics as well, and or their fermented food. I use a lot of homeopathy, and that's very individualized, but there are a few breathing remedies that have worked very well for patients. And one or two patients I've given inhaled hydrogen peroxide, and they did very well with that. And I use homeopathic silver as a gargle, and in the nares to kind of decrease the viral load, and that works great. And that's one of my personal favorites. And I do that if I'm exposed. I do a silver gargle. A couple times I thought I might be getting it. I had exposures from the clinic, and I did that regime personally, and I did really well. Didn't get sick. So, those are some guidelines. And of course, once again, this is not meant to be medical advice. People should work with their own practitioners, just some ideas and guidelines. And that's what I've done. But however, the bottom line caveat, if people don't change their diet, your immune function, these are Band-Aids. You need to work at the root cause, which is your dietary change, and somehow switching your diet to organic. Yeah. Somehow you have to find the means, the ways, the financial, and Zen, I know you've done it. And I know you've done it with nursery schools, showing them how to, on a budget that comes in lower than processed foods, you can switch to organic. So it's possible. Zen Honeycutt did it. Yes. And places like Costco now, Trader Joe's, Sprouts, Safeway are offering organics, even comparable price. And in Costco, a couple times they were lower. Mm-hmm. Like the olive oil, organic olive oil was lower, the Costco brand. I said, whoa, amazing. So I still say root cause, eliminate the root cause, which is improving your gut function. And that's where your immune system comes from. So without gut health, there is no health.
Absolutely. And so, it's really distressing for me to see lines around the block at Jack in the Box and Krispy Kreme. I actually saw a post on Nextdoor, and somebody was saying, guys, does anybody know what's going on at Jack in the Box and Krispy Kreme? There's lines around the block, and people are like, no, there's nothing going on. People just want their their comfort food or their treats. And then we see people, other doctors, I don't know where you stand on the hydroxychloroquine, how do you say the end?
Hydroxychloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine. But when I see doctors saying everybody should be taking hydroxychloroquine, it's a little upsetting to me, because I think that has the general public think they can go to Jack in the Box and Krispy Kreme, eat terrible food, and just take a drug like hydroxychloroquine, and they're going to be fine and they're not going to get COVID. That's not fine, folks. That's still being dependent on big pharma. And that's not what we want to do. We want to be healthy so that if we are exposed to any kind of virus, our body overcomes it and we can keep on trucking. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So, indeed, nobody wants to be a slave or beholden to pharmaceuticals. And there's a role for them on occasion. I brought them into my own treatment plans, and sometimes they just are amazing. I never say throw the baby out with the bathwater. However, for many of us, we have to go back to the roots, the basics on good health. We have to get rid of these carb addictions, because that's exactly what they are. Those carbohydrate, they're nutrient zero. To say never to have a donut or whatever it is that you're craving, of course I'm not. It's moderation, I get it. But honestly, these days, I'm thinking I've got a little more hardcore. I used to do the 80-20 rule. If you eat well 80% of the time, if you've got health challenges, if you've got, sick family members, if you've got chronic disease, whether it's hypertension or cardiovascular disease, you shouldn't be eating that stuff at all. And after 2 weeks, you will lose the addiction. We have a couple of studies that come out that really rock my world. That families who came off their regular diet and switched to organic, all their pesticide levels dropped. That study came out a week ago. Countries that ate more fermented foods had lower rate of COVID. That study came out about 2 weeks ago. And one of my favorite studies is called the Nutri-Nantes study. I know, I'm sorry, I don't speak French. Out of France, over 114,000 people surveyed. The people who ate organic had lower rates of cancer, breast, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So now I'm saying things a bit different. We really need to get this mindset out of, a drive-through. Give me a pill, that I just want no blue pill, no red pill. And that change happens with real food. And we have to go back to slow eating and family-based, which is COVID has forced us to do. I think it's an upside of COVID. Personally, there have been some upsides for a lot of families. They've slowed down, they eat together, they cook. And I say we have to get off this mindset that I can do what I want and a pill will fix me. Remember Pop, Pop, Fizz, Fizz, Alka-Seltzer commercial, eat whatever you want and take an Alka-Seltzer. That was promoted in the 70s and 80s when I was, a young buck. That that has to go. And so people will feel so much better. And people say, well, I don't eat organic and I'm fine. Well, maybe for now. And how's your kid? But I say use your own family of 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 people, whatever it is. Switch for 4 weeks. Do a trial. You're the N of 4, 5, 6, whatever your family number is, and give it 4 weeks to see how you all feel. It takes about 4 weeks for some. I have people report they're better in 3 days when they switch their diets. And they will save money, not eating out, not eating junk food.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that. I went cold turkey, no gluten, no dairy when my naturopathic doctor prescribed that a while ago for me. And within 2 weeks, I started to feel a difference. Within 6 weeks, I was a new person. But you have to go cold turkey. You cannot keep introducing dairy or gluten if that's what you're trying to avoid. I know it's a slightly different what you're talking about, but the cold turkey issue is incredibly important because you've got to be able to flush it out of your body. You have to let your body be able to reset. And if you're talking about building a good gut microbiome, if you keep putting glyphosate into your gut, which has been shown to destroy beneficial gut bacteria and allow for the proliferation of pathogenic gut bacteria, then you're continuing to destroy your immune system. So you really do have to go 100% organic, right? Or 100% avoid whatever that food is that's an allergen for you in order to see health improvements. It doesn't mean that later on you can't eat it, right? Maybe a year or a couple months or whichever, but you've got to try cold turkey first.
I know it's hard. And I ask for people tell me I eat well. And I said, great, show me a photo of your pantry. Let's see how well you eat. And they show me pictures. I'm like, wait a second. And the other place where people screw up a lot, there's been a big boost in sales of alcohol during COVID. So hard liquor, wine, beer.
234% increase in the sale of alcohol. Just posted that this morning. People are using alcohol to cope. Now, what do you think that's doing to our immune system, Dr. Pero?
Well, I can tell you, it's clear because in California, let's speak about California. If you don't drink organic wine, 100% of them tested positive for high levels of glyphosate. And it's not just one herbicide alone. Glyphosate's an herbicide. It's at least 6. And there are more toxic pesticides in that wine, and they are fungicides, which are probably even in some cases more toxic than Roundup, if there is such a thing. 100% toxic. So you're drinking that. Beer, loaded with pesticides. And these German beer study that came out a few years ago, 18 out of 18 beers all tested positive for glyphosate-based herbicides. And in some places, they couldn't get the beer to go because you need yeast, and the yeast were being affected by the pesticides. So we take a look at that. And so alcohol, a lot of alcohol comes from barley, rye, potatoes. Now, I hope they're not using that innate potato, that gene-edited potato to make vodka. Vodka comes from potatoes. I don't know what potatoes they're using, but if they're using that gene-edited potato with all the rogue proteins in there, and then you have a reaction a few days later, you're probably not going to link it to the innate potato. Now, I honestly don't know if they're using innate potatoes to make vodka. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a vodka drinker, but I'm thinking they're not labeled. So you have no idea what they used. And not only am I concerned about GMOs, we run the website GMO Science, I am concerned about gene editing, because where profit is coming from are patents. And gene editing is all about patents. These companies are rushing to patent. Impossible Foods has 14 patents, 100 in the pipeline, making their Impossible Food line, the burger, etc. And that's where people profit. You can't patent an apple, but you can patent a genetically modified one. You can't patent vitamin C, but you can patent that antiviral antibiotic that they're pushing for COVID. You see, so there is this, I call it the patent parade that is marching forward. And I just saw this alarming study, and I don't even know if we should go there, but I'll bring it up because, full disclosure, New Yorker here, they patented the COVID virus, the coronavirus in the US. It was patented, and I think in the late 1990s. And not only was the virus patented, but the treatment and the testing for it was patented. And I didn't get the full data on the study, and I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. It's interesting. So I kind of file that on my hard drive back here somewhere because I know it's going to pop back up again. But I'm thinking this is where pharma, tech companies make their money by these patents. So you want to eat real food, not patented food.
Absolutely. I have to share, we just asked Perfect Day, the company Perfect Day, about their ice cream called Brave Robot. And it's yeah, Brave Robot is the name of the ice cream. They say it's a non-animal whey protein ingredient we use from Perfect Day foods that does not contain GMOs. However, it says the microflora used to make the protein are amazing at producing different kinds of protein naturally. In this case, Perfect Day gives them the genetic instructions for producing whey protein. The modified microflora is filtered out, leaving only pure protein. In other words, genetic modification is part of the initial process, as in think of microflora, as in mini protein factories, but not in the protein itself. This is how tricky, this is how tricky they're getting the response. It is genetically modified, but because the end result, they're saying you can't find the GMOs in the end result of the protein, which is casein also, by the way. So it's not really non-animal, right? Or does contain casein, which could affect people with those types of allergies. Then they're being very tricky, but they can patent this and they can bring out a new product to the market, this is all about money, wouldn't you say?
You have given the perfect example of this argument I'm presenting and the concerns I have. And indeed, what they do is they genetically modify the yeast, same thing with the Impossible Burger, the same thing for MSG. It often has a genetically modified yeast, certain vaccines genetically modified, insulin is genetically modified. The organisms that are producing the substance are genetically modified. So even if they were able to remove the genetically modified components, there is still the production of these new proteins, because once you genetically modify an organism, the whole sequence of production changes and a new series of proteins are developed. I'll call them rogue proteins, based on Dr. Martineau's terminology. I believe that's where I borrowed that from. These new rogue proteins, our body has not seen them before. In case of the Impossible Burger, I'm not familiar with that particular ice cream. There are 44 novel proteins that have been created that your immune system has not seen, and therefore your immune system may recognize, along with your leaky gut, as foreign invaders, and you mount an immune response, and that's called inflammation. If it goes on chronically, that's chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation can lead to autoimmune disease against self, and the ultimate immunity disorder is cancer. And all on the rise. So I take big issue with those products. They're not being honest. Impossible Foods, it took me forever to get their studies and their data, to read their data. And it's really hard. What I've been chasing down right now, and I cannot get the data, but I will, is biomilk, BIOMILQ, coming out, I believe, South Carolina. 2 gals are producing it. It's been supported by a lot of big spenders, like I think Bill Gates is supporting it and others. And it's supposed to be close to breast milk. It's not genetically modified. So they say it's from a mammary cell line. They're creating this lab produced milk instead of formula, for, families are changing. Some can't nurse. Breast milk, of course, is the best food for babies. So as a formula analog. Now, I want to see the data. Because as Dr. Arpad Pusti said, the first scientist, one of my heroes to study GMOs, is where you find the interesting information is in the data. And it's in the details of the data. Their details, the data, their methods. The results that they report out are not often what they really found. It's their interpretation. So, for example,
we know about the interpretation.
We know about the interpretation.
Completely opposite of what the study actually showed. Yeah.
And we're, Americans are not that well versed in science. I think we're like 37th in the world compared to other countries. We're not strong in science. We're importing a lot of people from other countries to run Silicon Valley here in California who are stronger in science and engineering. But anyway, that's another side. But you can see where people are trying to promote this idea, better living through technology. Right. And that's what we're battling against now. We're not anti-tech, anti-science. I'm concerned about these food-like substances that are now in our takeout, Burger King, in our baby formula and breast milk analogs, these ice creams. And parents, people, eaters are going to need a PhD to figure out what to eat when they go to the supermarket. So I say, stop, eat real food. You grew it, you picked it, you bought it from the farmer, hopefully an organic market. And that's what we have to go back to. If you can't understand the study or the label, why are you eating it?
That's great. If everybody just listened to that part right there, we would put big pharma out of business in a year or two. People would be healthier. They would, and that's not the point to put big pharma business. There are big pharma things, but people wouldn't be so sick. America wouldn't be so sick if we were eating healthy food, if we were eating real nutrient dense food. We would be on our way to wellness. We would not be reacting in such a way that we are from COVID, if those numbers are accurate. So can you say why, I mean, you've mentioned inflammation, you've mentioned alcohol. Do you think those are some of the things that are contributing to why some people get very sick from COVID and others don't? Is it?
Yeah, I think when the study is published, they're showing that, for example, the elderly who have been very hard hit by COVID have extremely low nutrient levels. So many of them don't eat. They live on these very low budgets, pensions and what have you. They can no longer cook for themselves. They're, eating a lot of pre-made canned food, some of the worst stuff. So I believe in part it's their nutrient levels. They don't have the nutritional oomph to fight this virus. So I think a lot of the studies that are coming out now are starting to show that. Even JAMA, a very traditional journal, came out in July, I believe, Journal American Medical Association, saying, nutrients do play a role in health and chronic disease. What a thought. So for example, I keep honing in on zinc. There are others. It's not just zinc, it's magnesium. You need vitamin C, you need B12. You need these vitamins to run your enzyme systems to fight infection. Immune function takes a lot of energy. You need mitochondrial function. You need certain, antioxidants to help your the little batteries of your cells to work well. So I believe part and parcel, the reason why the elderly, for example, and why we're so affected by COVID is what we're eating, this nutrient poor food. Even our organic food, as you so eloquently showed earlier, Zen, is embarrassingly low, although better than conventional food. And people have to realize that it's not stopping. Companies, Monsanto Bayer, are now pushing for a new type of herbicide tolerant crop that will resist 5 pesticides because of glyphosate resistance, weed resistance. So it's not stopping, it's actually getting worse. And a study that just was published blew my mind. This one, I just read it. I thought, okay, those herbicide tolerant crops, the GMO crops, corn, soy, canola that everyone's eating, if you're eating processed foods in particular, those plants also have been harmed. Even the herbicide tolerant crops are harmed by the spraying of glyphosate-based herbicides, and they are having issues with stress, release of attack chemicals. Plants release certain chemicals when they're attacked, like I think they're called like lectins and other things, and have shown reduced evidence of oxidative stress and reduced glutathione, which is the master antioxidant. So even the plants who were designed to tolerate herbicide like glyphosate-based herbicides, those plants are also not tolerating it, and that's brand new. We weren't told that before. So all the plants
meaning that they change. And I heard this from a doctor or a farmer in the Midwest. He said the GMO alfalfa, it was like it was resisting and building up almost a scarring to the genetic modification, and it had more fiber and less protein. And the farmers did not like that. So he says that the farmers that know what's going on with the GMO alfalfa, which was at first stopped and then it was pushed through, they don't like it because he has less protein and more fiber, and they want their animals to be able to, they want to be able to feed them efficiently. And so it's almost like the plant itself is resisting, which the same thing happens, by the way, I need to mention this because of the fires. It's happening with 5G. When there's a cell tower, the plants around are shown to have higher levels of terpenes, which makes them more flammable. So I would really like, for whatever researcher out there is looking at where all these fires are, Are they close to cell towers? Are these cell towers at all involved? Because they have been involved in the past. There have been cell towers, and cell companies have been sued because of the increase of fires. I know that's a whole nother topic, but that just goes to show that plants do react to their environment, right? And they develop different chemicals and things like that.
Yes, plants and trees are monitoring, and they increase and decrease depending on what they need. And like trees, for example, do the same thing. The plant life, and they talk to each other through fungi and have symbiotic relation with various other organisms in the soil. There's a whole network of life happening down there, how they're supporting each other. But plants do protect themselves with the production of certain anti-nutrients, and that's why we soak grains, for example. We soak a lot of beans and legumes to reduce those anti-nutrients like the phytases and what have you, to make them more tolerable for us, because plants have protective mechanisms. So these plants that are designed to resist the spraying of herbicides are stressed. They're not tolerating it well, and that's a myth. So we've been fed yet another myth about GMOs, GMO plants. So this whole way of eating has got to go. If we are going to save our children, our dogs, we need to get off the GMO chemical input treadmill today, like today. And your listeners, Zen, I know you have this amazing group of listeners, and I don't speak to just moms anymore. I'm speaking to granddads and little Susie, little Johnny, and all the kids in the family. Everyone needs to understand this. And it's a good segue for me, because we're starting a program at GMO Science called GMO Science Kids, because we need to be able to talk to our youth, and kids are smart. They know this stuff. And so we're trying to educate children. Oh, thank you. There we are. We've been around since 2014. We're a nonprofit website based on science. And now we're starting to look at, and I thought, I'm a pediatrician. Why am I not addressing kids? So we have a whole section that kids will be writing for us. It's all going to be generated by kids, their content, and it should be due any day. I'm a little bit behind. And so this is where we are going. I think we have to educate our youth, our kids, millennials, Gen X, the whole group, and our elderly, all of us. So I think we have to, I'll get off that soapbox.
Great. So that'll be happening in a couple of days, and people can,
couple weeks.
Okay, a couple weeks soon. So they can have their children submit information about GMOs. Is that what you said? What kind of information would you like them to submit?
Well, if they're interested, they should contact me at Michelle, michelle.gmoscience@gmail.com. And if their kids are interested in writing content for us, I will give them some ideas on, the kind of content we're looking for. We have two wonderful boys right now in Illinois writing about why kids shouldn't eat GMOs. So we're all, creating content, and I'll give them some things they can write about. I have one adorable 8-year-old boy who's doing some nice GMO drawings for me. So it's going to be kid focused, kid content, etc. And I'm very excited about that.
That's great. And here's the staff at GMO Science.
Got
some great
Rachel, Kids Right to Know, Jot Theory, she's our creative director. Ginger, oh my God, Souders Mason she created a pesticide-free zone here in our county, and she runs her own organization. She's just brilliant. So we have a great team, and we have a who's who list of amazing advisors also, Zen.
Really amazing. That's GMO Science. And you've got some new projects coming up. Check it out. They've got a lot of great information. And you have heard it directly from the doctor that we need to change our diet, folks. We need to eat organic. We need to get rid of the GMOs. And this is the best thing that we can do. Eat the prebiotic foods, the fermented foods. I'm also imagining get the sugar out of the diet, because the sugar feeds the bad bacteria, right? Yes, she's giving us the thumb down.
Yeast grows up. Yeast loves sugar and EMFs, the electromagnetic frequencies. So cut that sugar back. We are a sugar nation. Cut it back. Other countries don't eat a fraction of the sugar that American children eat. American people, not just children. So yes, please reduce the sugar in your diet. It should be a treat, an occasional treat.
Yeah, occasional treat. But for people who are really sick, especially people who have cancer or autoimmune diseases, I say you've got to do the mind shift from treat to threat, at least for a certain period of time, because that sugar will reduce your immune system for 4 to 5 hours. And if you think about it, some people are eating a sugary breakfast for cereal, then they have, with lunch they have something sweet, some soda or some, sugary fruit with corn syrup in it. And then for they'll have a snack, they'll have a protein bar or a candy bar for snack. And then for dinner they'll have something sweet, some desserts or brownies or ice cream afterwards. So all day long they are weakening their immune system with sugar. So I'm glad that we touch upon that as well, because that's one of the most important things. It's one of the things we did for my son when he had autism symptoms, and we discovered that his gut was all messed up, gut dysbiosis. He had multiple allergies. He had C. diff, fungus, all kinds of bacteria. One of the things we had to do besides treat what was going on with the gut was remove all sugar during the holidays, from Halloween till New Year's, no sugar. Even Santa Claus didn't bring any sugar in his stocking. So that was a huge deal, but he got better in 6 weeks. His autism symptoms were reduced and never came back. And, and that wasn't the only thing we did, but that was definitely a factor in there. So reducing the sugar right now, especially during COVID, is very important. I have to just one more topic before we go, and that is masks. Do you believe masks are more harmful or can be beneficial? What do you see as preventing? You talked about preventing and protecting our families. What do you see around that?
I know there's been a lot of, oh my God, a lot of issues around masks. I
Mhm.
believe they work. I do. I believe they reduce infection. We've known that in medicine. We wear them in the operating rooms. We wear them when there's an infectious patient. We cover our faces. It works. However, I say that as a caveat because I also don't believe children should be wearing masks. And there are a bunch of reasons why I think children learn to read facial cues, social cues by their people's faces, and if they're hidden they can adjust, especially little children. Also, so many kids now have social anxiety. It's a big issue, and communication disorders. They need to be able to learn to read faces. And you say, well, we're only wearing the mask for a while. Well, are we? It's been already now months of mask wearing, and now we have kids breathing in those masks all day. And of course, most of the masks are not organic, as you know.
Mhm.
I don't know what dryer sheets people are using, if they're washing the mask out, or we're using those synthetic fibers. What are we breathing all day for kids? So I don't personally, and I know people will disagree with me, I don't want to see my children, especially little kids, with the mask on. I do think in big social settings, supermarkets, whatever, they do decrease spread. COVID's airborne. I think they do work. However, that's all I'm going to say about it, because I'm not an expert,
Right.
and I've not read tons of studies on pros and cons, and it's such a hot button. But
Yeah.
that's my opinion. And when
Yeah.
parents ask me,
Great. Well, thank you very much for touching upon
oh,
that. I'm
oh,
sure that question was wondering, people were wondering, what does a doctor, what does a doctor think about that? And it's important that we do our research, and do the best we can to protect our families. So, well, thank you again. My big takeaway is eat organic and make sure to reduce sugar in your diet, eat the prebiotics and probiotics, and talk to your friends and family. I loved what you said. I appreciate it so much, so much. Check out GMO science and what's making our children sick. If you want to dive into how to boost your immune system and protect your family, not just from COVID, but from many different viruses and other types of chronic illnesses that don't have anything to do with viruses, the most important thing to do is to boost your immune system and eat healthy. So thank you again, Dr. Perro, for being with us.
thank you, Zen. Once again, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.